Welcome to the Damn Good Dogcast. This is your host, Robert Reynolds. Got a lot to talk about. Got a special guest coming to talk A&M. Let's talk A&M football. Sorry about that, guys. Having some technical difficulties. Anyways, Georgia. Georgia football, a lot to look forward to. Obviously, with the NFL draft tonight, you have several guys that potentially could be first-round draft picks. Look no further. Azeez Ojulari, you have Stokes and Campbell potentially going into the first round. So there's a lot to look forward to tonight for if you're a dog fan. Even if you don't cover the NFL, I don't really get into the NFL too much. However, we'll be watching it, see where these dogs go. Also, just popped out, 2 p.m. tomorrow, Denylon Morissette is set to announce his commitment. And boy, what a big commitment it would be. I'm going to make my prediction now. I think he's a dog. I just think that he fits the bill for that. Obviously, that starts the recruiting for receivers anyway. You look at a receiving class that I think is going to be huge for this cycle. I think you can look at Evan Stewart, Kojo, Antwi, which we'll talk about in a little bit. I think there's a lot of room for these guys, and it's going to have a loaded receiver class this cycle, I should say. On that note, though, more things talking football. Obviously, I'm ready for the regular season to start. Let's pop in, see if anybody's in the comments right now. I don't see anybody just yet. But, I think if I'm having to make a prediction here, I'm not doing a draft preview or anything like that, show or anything. But I will make my prediction where I think Azeez will go. And I think he goes to the Ravens. The Ravens let go of several people, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They lose Judon. What a fit he would be on the Ravens. It would just be insane. I just don't see it any other way. I think that would be a great fit for him. Hard-nosed football. I think you look for Azeez to have that 3-4 type, or I should say, that 3-4 type guy coming off the edge, right? Everybody knows if you're a dog fan, he's an elite pass rusher. There's no question about it. With that being said, you really have to look at what he's a fit for, right? It's hard to really tell these guys to go in and play in a system that they don't fit in. Obviously, that's why you get drafted to where you go. It's like Jake Fromm is a perfect example. I questioned that pick in the 5th round heavily because knowing Fromm and knowing his arm strength and things like that, the questions, kind of made no sense when he got drafted to Buffalo, especially with Josh Allen there. Even as a backup, it kind of didn't make sense. Certain quarterbacks are just not built to sustain and play in certain places. To me, that didn't make sense. I don't see Azeez falling into that category. I think you see Azeez as a surefire first round. I've heard talks about him going into the second or slipping into the second. I just don't see that. He's just too good. NFL's a passing game now, like a true pass-happy league right now. Every team needs great elite guys off the edge. Azeez is your guy. I think you have to, right? I think you just have to do that. And, and obviously, like you look at Stokes and Campbell, right? Depending on the situation, this is why you hear guys talking about possibly getting drafted into the first round. You hear, what about the potential on runs on cornerbacks, right? If that happens, I think you could look into guys maybe trading up from, that wouldn't be taking another first-round pick, trading up to get a cornerback like Stokes or a cornerback like Tyson Campbell. So there is a good possibility that could happen. Obviously, it's the draft, and we don't really know, right? We don't really know, but it's always good to speculate. It's always very good to speculate. So, on that note, though, I'm going to take a quick break, and then we'll talk a little bit more, and then we'll have our special guest on to talk Texas A&M football. So on that note, let's take a quick break, brought to you by Buzzsprout. Ever since I started podcasting, I've used Buzzsprout, and let me tell you this, you cannot go wrong with Buzzsprout. The team at Buzzsprout is passionate about helping you succeed. One of the hardest things about creating and starting your own podcast is not knowing what to do. Buzzsprout, it's super easy. They will help you out in regards to what to do. Buzzsprout will get your show listed in every major podcast platform. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, you name it. Podcasting isn't hard when you have the right partners, and Buzzsprout is the best partner you could imagine. You'll get a great-looking podcast website, audio players that you can drop into your other websites, detailed analytics to see how people are listening, and other tools to promote your episodes. And there's a lot more than just that. Join over 100,000 podcasters already using Buzzsprout to get your message out to the world. Follow the link in the show notes and let Buzzsprout know that we sent you. Get you a $20 Amazon gift card if you sign up for the paid plan, and it helps support our show. Welcome back. As I was talking before the break, obviously the first round of the NFL draft is tonight, and all eyes from the state of Georgia, looking into potentially up to possibly 2 to 3 guys that could be first round picks. Obviously, it's a good time, to be a Georgia fan when it comes to the NFL draft, because obviously I think you look at if we get those first round picks, that's going to do so much. It's going to do so much for recruiting. Where we are in regards to recruiting now could only help get these guys. If we see one, I think, but if we see multiple first round picks, definitely worth looking into. Basically improved success with the recruiting front, which would be very hard to really improve, but it can be done. Obviously, looking into state of recruiting, right? I think you look at a lot of these guys, and they pay attention to your Georgias and to your Bamas and Floridas or whoever, right? These guys going first round. First round picks mean so much in recruiting. You have to account for that. You just have to. You really can't. I guess you could say you can't benefit enough from having those guys. Guys want to play in the league, and when you do that, it only brings more success to your program and obviously more recruits, right? Better recruits. Also, there is some, we'll probably talk about this in a little bit as well, but I guess you could say the push for an expanded college football playoff. I'm going to talk to Jordi here in a little bit, and I'm going to get his opinion on this as well. But if you're listening to this or you're watching live, definitely want to get your opinion on, or your thoughts on the expansion. And how that would play out, and what are your thoughts on that? So while the show's going, feel free to comment, chime in. We'll read the comments and kind of go from there. But I like it. I really think that it's a needed. It's really needed at this point. I feel like the playoffs. Obviously you have to be good to make it, but to me, it's kind of gotten still. So, on that note, though, we'll bring in the man himself, Jordi. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Can you hear me?
I can.
All righty. Yes, sir. Glad to be here. It's a little nasty day over here in Texas with the weather, but all things aside, it's a wonderful day to be alive.
Hey, fair enough. It's draft night, first round of the draft. I was talking earlier. I was actually talking about basically the expansion of the college football playoffs. Let's jump right in on that one. I know talking before the show, you had a couple thoughts about it, and I just want to see where you are. But after that, I think we'll expand out and we'll talk some A&M football for you. What are your thoughts on the push for the expansion of the playoffs? One of the articles I was reading could see it as maybe as much as 12 teams in the playoffs. What are your thoughts on that?
So, I'm messing with those settings real quick.
There you go.
My opinion is where we're at is not a very good place for the game, as in college football. I think the BCS is better than 4, but 8 is better than the BCS, in my opinion. Whereas, so right now you're just creating – everybody was going and getting all crazy about the Super League over in Europe, and then they started doing all this stuff over here, and that's basically what you're having. It's a smaller Super League, but you're not allowing teams to compete with Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, and Alabama. Everybody else, I mean, you can have a good team, but you're not going to be able to compete. And LSU won the Natty. They kind of caught lightning in a bottle there, and now their recruiting is picking up, so they might be able to be that the sixth team there. But as far as A&M goes, they're out recruiting Texas. They're recruiting very well, top 5, top 7 classes every year. But the guys like Jalen Waddle and the guy from Alito this year, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but A&M has been in the hunt for guys like that, and they just cannot get that sure. No matter what he does on campus, he's going to be a first-round draft pick. They can't get that at the skilled position right now, because the guys that are taking them are part of that quote-unquote Super League. And the whole thing is we are competing as best as we can with what we're getting, but the NCAA is almost holding you back. There was a lot more rotation of power in the BCS era than there has been in the college football playoff era. So if you go to 8 and give everybody an opportunity, so this year, I think if Oklahoma would have gotten in, they would have done a little bit more damage than everybody expected, and that would have boosted them. They already recruit nationally on offense, but I think it would have really boosted their defensive recruiting nationally in this coming class and the one before, as well as like in 2012, if there was 8 teams, A&M theoretically could have made the semis or even won the damn thing with Johnny, because nobody was playing better ball than them at the end of the year.
Yeah.
But you're never going to get that right now with 4 teams. It's going to be perceived as and part of the thing with the college football playoff is you have the human element, and the human element looks at a roster and looks at recruiting rankings and what is projected. And it's going to be hard to overcome Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama, either Georgia or LSU, whoever that 4th, all that. It's going to be hard to overcome that and be that 4th team when you're doing everything that you can, but no matter what you do, it's not good enough unless you're in the SEC. And then the SEC, you have Alabama, who's not going anywhere anytime soon.
No, looking at it now, kind of obviously if anybody didn't pay attention last year, A&M kind of hit that same club that Georgia's been in on several occasions, right? Already. You do enough. For A&M's case, y'all lost early to Bama. That was your only loss. You sit there and you basically get snubbed out in that 5th spot. And as a Georgia fan that's been there twice already, we know exactly how you feel, and it's just frustrating. Obviously, with Georgia, we've played Bama twice in SEC. Well, I would say we played LSU one back in 2019, and then 2020, obviously Bama. So, or not 2020, but 2018, 2019.
Right.
Sorry.
Right.
But looking into that, right? Obviously, like you said, Bama's one of those teams that not really many people can beat. You look really, the only team that I can actually say that's kind of beat them with some success and somewhat consistent, not even a full consistency, was Gus Malzahn in Auburn. And, other than that, there's really not a lot of people that are going to touch Bama, period. Now, as you were saying, I think expanding the playoffs, I would say 8 to start. That would be a key there. And there's several reasons why I think that it would benefit college football in itself. First, Saban talked about how if expanding the playoffs would devalue Um, it would devalue the
Well,
bowls, right?
right.
I don't believe that. These bigger bowls outside of the New Year's Six, basically, if you add the playoff games, those New Year's Six bowls automatically turn into playoff games. But then you have bigger games for the like basically you're sliding things up. So these bowls, that people are lesser known, I think would get slid up because more, I guess you could say, more powerful teams, right? Teams that are just
Right.
outside of the playoffs would be filling those spots. So if you're looking at maybe like a an Outback Bowl, right, just as an or a Belt Bowl or whatever, you put a powerful team, that's just outside the playoffs, right? If you put like a like a 10th ranked Florida team, and then put them against like a Texas team at number 11, right?
Right.
People's going to watch that game, even if it's not a New Year's Six bowl. Two, I think outside of that right there, it's going to value. I think it brings the value up. Two, you're going to see less opt outs. Look at, and I don't think Texas A&M had necessarily worry about it a ton, but when you look at Georgia, when we missed the playoffs, you
Oh,
look at, and Florida as an
yeah.
example against Oklahoma. Florida had all of their guys opt out. If you're
That was
playing for the
that was the wildest one ever. Like in when you're talking injuries and just in general opt outs for the draft, opt outs, injuries, everything. I think Kyle Pitts had what I mean, not Kyle Pitts, Kyle Trask. It was him and maybe one other starter left, maybe two. I don't remember what it was, but
there
that
were
offense
really it
was
was just
no.
Trask.
Yeah,
In
from what I
regards to
remember.
what everybody knows from that offense, Tony sat out, Pitt sat out, so you were looking at a shorthanded Florida staff.
Mhm.
But when you win the SEC, whether it's the East or the West, it doesn't matter where you go. The microscope is on you, right?
Mhm.
And Florida just got. There's no other way to put it. They got mollywopped by Oklahoma, and
Right.
like Florida wasn't even there. And I'm gonna save it for another day. But obviously, Dan Mullen's comments after the game, that right there in itself devalued the bowl in itself, right? Trying to
Right.
make the excuse to kind of devalue the loss, make it not as big, or like you weren't really trying to do whatever. Shit like that is really what is going to devalue these bowl games. If you
Right.
have 8 teams or 12 teams in 4 or 6, 7 maybe different bowl games, right? Keep the
Right.
Rose Bowl as your national title or something like that, right? There's always these theories going around on how to do it. If you make 6 or 7 playoff games, you add a week for one. So basically, college football fans are going to be happy because that's an extra week of football to watch. But two, if the way you seed these games, right? Whether if you get your Power Five conferences, right? Each conference championship gets a guaranteed spot. You take a power or in a group of five, right? The highest ranked group of five, and then 2 at large. Those 2 at large could be key right there, right? It's going to give people the incentive to play into that. So they're going to put forth the effort, and you're going to get a better quality game. And the regular season will mean more. Now, at the end of the day, I think you're going to see a 2-loss team make it to the playoffs. But you saw this, and Georgia's definitely on the way here. Scheduling your out-of-conference regular season games against marquee names. Georgia set up Clemson again, Ohio State, Oklahoma. That's just to name a few, right?
Right.
College football is leaning that way. And honestly, if you expand the playoffs, you're going to get more marquee matchups like that and a better product when it comes to the college football playoffs.
I agree with that, but I was thinking about something today, and I think it needs to be set up. If you expand it, it needs to be set up to where the ACC, Pac-12, Big 12, and SEC. I think I said them all. The Power Five all get a champion, and then you have enough. So I think you have to go to at least 8. You get 2 at largest, and then you can have room for the Power Five. I mean the non-AQ, if there is one, kind of like Cincinnati. But as far as saving the bowl system, I was kind of wanting to pick your brain here. I am of the opinion that there's a bunch of different things you can do here. I don't hate going back to just a national championship game. I don't hate it. It's better than what we have now, in my opinion. I also, what do you think about changing the requirements to 7 and 5? I think that would fix a lot of problems there because then, you know, I mean, 6 and 6 would probably eliminate like the Vanderbilts every now and then and stuff like that. But if you go 7 and 5, you know, you change the requirements, whatever it is, or limit the amount of, or get rid of the amount of bowls. Obviously, there's money to be made, and the NCAA is money hungry, so that would never happen. But theoretically, changing the number of wins needed to get into a bowl versus or limiting the number of bowls would, I think, fix the back half of your bowls, and either expanding the playoffs or going back to just a national championship game would fix the Florida situation, the Georgia situation against Texas. All that would, and as long as you have guys that are worrying about their career, which is where everything's headed to, it's becoming more about the player and less about school pride with these upper echelon schools. You're always going to have bowl opt outs, and I don't think that's going to ever get fixed unless you expand the playoffs. But as far as making the games more important and getting the guys' attentions for the ones that are there. So, I mean, I feel like Georgia in 2018, even the guys that were playing in that game, they realized that they didn't want to be there. They realized that they missed out on a chance at a national championship or a chance at playing for one. And then so they had no motivation to be there. Whereas Texas had every motivation in the world. And those guys, like the seniors, were like, this is my last one. I'm going out on top. We're going to beat this SEC guy. And the juniors, even the guys that were coming back for Georgia, was like, okay, it's on to next year. Who gives a shit about this game?
Yeah, so, I see that.
I don't know. What do you think about changing the 6 and 6 requirement is basically my question.
Well, I think you have to look into – I mean, you really have to look into the overall scheme of things, right? You could take away, you know, if you do raise that up, you know, there's certain teams that aren't going to make it. So how does that impact the amount of bowls, right?
Right.
So you have to keep that into mind. Also, if you expand the playoffs, you have to look into, maybe you add a couple more bowls to compensate for the playoff bowl games, right? So, you know, if you do that, I think you get a better quality product, right? But how would it impact the regular season? You know, you look at teams just within the SEC. You look at South Carolina and Vanderbilt, right? Arkansas, which, you know, you see those teams that, you know, aren't going to get close. You know what I mean? Like, more likely you might come close, but it's more likely not going to happen. How does that impact the regular season?
Right.
So when it comes to that, you know, I could see that coming in. But honestly, I think I like it at 6 and 6. And the reason being, you know, you're going to have your pros and cons, but you know, there's some teams in there that start, you know, there's injuries, right? You can take a toll. Some teams might be better than their 6 and 6 record. Now, obviously, you have that situation where some teams just are what they are. But at the end of the day, you know, situations arise like that. But I see both ways there, and I don't think it'll be a problem either way. Because, I mean, let's be honest, those are going to be your back-end bowls for the most part anyway.
Right.
So, you know, but at the end of the day, you do want to try to make the bowl game experience in every bowl game, try to make it as, you know, as important as possible. So I can see the 7 and 5 thing going.
Yeah. There's something's got to be done. There's about to be a lot of money lost. You know, I mean, was it the Belk Bowl had the greatest social media rep ever? And, you know, they just couldn't make it because you're just losing so much money because nobody gives a crap about your bowls anymore. I think push is going to come to shove where you're either going to have to expand the playoffs to make the other bowls more important, or you're going to have to, you know, make a requirement like, okay, you can either be 7 and 5 or maybe it's, you know, not letting as many bowls be a possibility or limiting the amount of SEC teams or something like that. You know, there's just in a money-driven world, the bowl games are losing way too much money these days. And it push is about to come to shove. I don't see it happening right away, but there's definitely things in the works about how to basically make people make it worth their money. So whatever that may be, who knows?
Fair enough. Now, I want to kind of switch over here. What I want to do, obviously, we're talking about bowl games, right? And I want to kind of go through a spring, or not a spring, but a season preview for A&M. Right? So I'm going to pop up your A&M schedule right here.
13-0, calling it right now.
13-0.
No.
There we go.
There.
So obviously, looking at your schedule, I think Texas A&M, without even looking at the schedule, obviously going to be in the hunt for the SEC West. I think maybe a second place. Second place finish is reasonable. Maybe even first. Depending on how Bama handles the loss of Mac Jones, Waddle, Devontae, and all that.
Right.
But so we'll kind of break this down. We're going to go into the top half. We'll go from your first game to your bye week, and then we'll flip around and do the last four. So obviously you start off against Kent State. Then you go to Colorado. Back home against New Mexico. You're playing a neutral site game against Arkansas. Then you
real quick on that Arkansas game. I would not be surprised if they give us. I mean, they're bringing back everybody off that team they had last year, and I don't think it's crazy to think that Arkansas could be a 7-win team this year. But they always give us a tough one. So I don't know how much Georgia fans follow A&M and Arkansas, but even in Arkansas's sorriest years over the past 7 years, I think A&M's had a double-digit win against them twice and Arkansas hasn't made but one bowl game in the last 7 years or 2 bowl games. And A&M still can never put them away. Last year was the first year that we kind of took care of business against them. But they return a lot. Basically, everybody but their quarterback and running backs. Oh, well, and then Mike Woods recently transferred. So that might affect my opinion on it now.
That might be a huge blow for Arkansas.
Yeah. So we'll see how that affects them. Their running game was what did A&M in last year. Mm-hmm. They opened up about a 3-touchdown lead, and then A&M just forgot how to tackle for the first time in 3 years in the run game, and they weren't filling their gaps. And so we'll see what happens there. But if you like to watch, I guess it's the closest thing A&M has to a rivalry game right now in the SEC. It's always good football or good competition, high intensity. The football's not always the greatest, but it's always a fun game to watch. So I don't know who Georgia plays that weekend, but if y'all have a bye or you're looking for something to watch at your tailgate, I would suggest turning on Arkansas A&M for at least the first half. It's normally a little edgy and high intensity.
Yeah, we'll be playing Vanderbilt that week. So
no, you got a tough one there.
How Vanderbilt handled the 2020 season. I'm sure every Georgia fan is going to turn that game on and hope to God that Kirby lets it go and drops 70 on them.
Yeah.
That's I have a feeling that's almost a consensus feeling around the state of Georgia right now, or at least the program, right, from a fan base. But looking into the 8 games right here, obviously you're replacing, Kellen Mond, and obviously the quarterback is the most important position. I think if I'm not mistaken, Haynes King is going to be the starter there. And honestly,
he's projected, yes, sir.
Well, projected starter.
Yes, sir.
And honestly, I think you look at, I don't know really what to take from Haynes. I know he's young. Kellen had that experience, right? He may not have been the most flashy kid by any means, but he was smart, and he, obviously he made mistakes from time to time, but I mean, he did kind of, lead you to where y'all were last year. So replacing him is going to be tough.
You may know this guy, but there's this cat that I think he's from Georgia. His name might be Justin Fields.
Yeah.
His Haynes King's testing numbers are all within either better or within like a tenth or an inch of Justin Fields. In my opinion, he throws a better ball than Justin Fields. He's just not as big in stature. Justin Fields probably has, I think, 1.5 inches, 2 inches on him, and then probably 10 pounds, which is the biggest difference there for me. So Haynes King has quite the accolades behind his name. State champion in Texas. His dad's was his high school football coach. The guy knows the game. It's all about, and you saw with Kellen, it's all about picking up Jimbo's offense, and it's really hard for that to work out with a young guy. But if there's anybody that can do it, it'll be him. And something that we've talked about several times on our show, if Zach Calzada ends up winning the job over Haynes King, that means A&M will be extremely dangerous this year because there's something there that Jimbo sees in him that, you're basically throwing away this borderline 5-star quarterback because he'll more than likely transfer out for a guy that's only going to be there 2 more years, more than likely. So the biggest question for A&M is not at quarterback. It's more about what the quarterback has around him this year.
Yeah. So with that being said, I think you look at the first 8 games. I think, looking at it right here, obviously Kent State, I think, is a win. Colorado is a win. New Mexico is a win. Then you go to Arkansas, right? So I think, that's going to be a tough game. Coach Pittman has that team buying in and playing good football. They really played good football last year. I said it last year as well. If he won 3 games, being a first-year coach, that he had a good year, and he did. So I think that team's going to expand. However, I think just A&M right now has too much talent for Arkansas to really handle. I know they play it tough, but I'm going to call a win there. You look at Mississippi State, I don't see Mississippi State. This FPI rankings that ESPN gave out, I don't think that's too much. So I think you beat Mississippi State.
Yeah.
Then it comes Alabama, and I think this game right here is going to be your first loss, and it's just because it's Alabama. I think looking at it, I think Texas A&M has one of the best shots to beat Alabama in the regular season. I think that's the biggest threat for them. If they get past A&M, I think they go through the regular season undefeated. I don't see Florida being a problem for Bama, nothing like that. Then you look at Missouri and South Carolina. I think you literally come out of that stretch right there, 7-1. I don't see Missouri being too big of a problem for you, and I don't see South Carolina with Shane Beamer there. I just see y'all going into the bye week at 7-1.
I don't disagree there. I don't know how much you want to get into, but real quick on the Alabama game. So the biggest deal this year is A&M and their offensive line. They lost 4 or 5 starters off of what was, in my opinion, the best offensive line in college football last year, regardless of what the Joe Moorhead Award said. The thing is A&M's coaches are putting out not feelers, but giving off the impression that this offensive line could be better if they can gel quickly enough. They're dealing with a lot of bumps and bruises. They won't be as deep is the biggest problem. So last year they had these guys that were behind them that, in all honesty, are more talented, just not as far developed. So whenever you got into a bump or bruise last year, you could plug in these guys behind them and you wouldn't really miss too much of a beat. Now they're having to put these 5 – they've got about 7 to 8 guys when fall camp comes that are going to be rotating, have a chance at starting. And if you get a bump or bruise there's not really much behind those guys right now except for true freshmen. So the whole deal is how well can they come together as a unit, and that's all the coaches are saying is if they can mesh like they did last year, you got an potential All-American at left tackle, but then you've got 4 other guys that haven't started before. So, but they are all, in the coach's opinion, more talented than the ones that before them. And on top of that, A&M kind of held their own offensively against Alabama. There was a pick 6 where Kellen made a poor decision. But then after that, they were just trying to play catch up and getting out of the rhythm because the defense couldn't keep anybody in front of them. We'll see, Alabama's got 5 stars all over the field. But I think there will be a big step back in, I don't think you have 3 first-rounders on the roster right now at wideout. So if A&M can keep Bama underneath, I think A&M could potentially win this game 42-38. I don't know if you keep Bama under 38, but A&M will have
offense, even I don't know. That's a tough task.
No, it's definitely a tough task. But if you can keep them at 40 or under 40, A&M will have a real chance. The thing that Jimbo's going to want to do is run it down their throats. That's not like they did against Florida for 6 yards a carry. In this game, it would look more like, 2-3 here, get a 6 there, let the quarterback find these guys that are open when it's time. And they were doing just that in the first half last week or last year and then it kind of fell apart after the pick six, and then they started trying to play catch up, and then it got ugly. But the thing is A&M has potentially the best defense in college football. Georgia would probably argue against that. Alabama would probably argue against that. I was talking to a guy on our podcast today, and we think, depending on how things play out, because everybody has these fringe guys, A&M potentially has 8 draft picks coming off of this defense for the 2022 draft next year, with 2 of them being potential for – one of them being a top 5 pick in DeMarvin Leal, and then Damani Richardson could end up as the safety could end up as a top first round, second round pick. So I think A&M can do it. The question is where will the offensive line look like? What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 7th game or 6th game of the season. What will they look like there? Will they be meshing well, or will they still be playing? Like feeling each other out? If they're feeling each other out, that Alabama defense will give them hell, and you could see something turn into 52-24 again or something like that. But in all realistic expectations, you should be 7-1 going into the bye week hosting Auburn.
So. And I think, like you said, I think you're looking at 7-1, and then kind of to keep moving forward here. Obviously, you have your bye week, and I think it's well deserved after playing Bama, and then look before Auburn. I don't trust Auburn. I just don't with Harsin there. Bo Nix is average to me, so I think that's a win as well.
Yes, sir.
The problem here comes with Ole Miss playing in Oxford. That offense is going to be extremely potent. I know A&M boasts one of the better defenses in the country, but let's be honest here. Ole Miss just has so much firepower. They gave Alabama fits. They gave everybody really fits. So I think that is a potential game that you got to watch out for. I'm going to make the prediction here that y'all win it, but barely. Then you go to Prairie View A&M. I think that's one of those blowout games. Get you ready for the Bayou down there, and then you go into LSU the last game. I think you pull out a squeaker there. I'm going to give you the benefit of doubt and go squeaker. Just past LSU.
I have no idea what to think about those guys this year.
What was that?
I have no idea what to think about those guys this year. I mean, theoretically, you look at the recruiting class and what they returned, and they should be stout. But LSU's just a hit or miss team. They've always recruited at the same level. So I don't know what your opinion is on them. I'd love to hear yours, because all I hear is those guys over from One Team, One Podcast tell us how they're going to beat Bama and win the Natty this year. And I don't believe that, but I don't believe they're the sub 500 team that they were last year.
No, they're not. They're not a sub 500 team. My honest opinion here, I think you look at overall the team. They're not going to be that middle of the pack type of thing. Their quarterback, I know you had, was it Max Johnson? I think it was. I know obviously Miles Brennan should be the guy, but even then,
the feeling out of Baton Rouge is that Max Johnson will more than likely win the job, and Miles Brennan transfers out.
He handled himself against Florida. I'll take that. But when you look at it, though, I think Keishon Butte and then you add on Stingley and Ricks, right, in the defense there. I don't see them beating Bama. I think they make it competitive. But let's be honest, Bama is just ridiculous. Every year in, year out, they're ridiculous. And so I see LSU maybe losing 2 or 3 games. I have to look at their schedule to give you an honest answer here. But I can see them losing maybe 2 or 3 games and coming in second or third. I just think Bama's still, even losing Mac Jones and Waddle and Smith, they've got too much firepower to really have I'm not saying a true threat, but I think they still win the West. So to your point here, I think LSU is a top 3 team for sure. After Bama, it's really a toss up of how LSU season goes, right? And you look at the allegations going on and things going on down there, how that's going to impact their season, right? It's going to be interesting to see what happens and transpires in that time. I know they self-bowl banned last year, but at the end of the day, their team is still good. I'm not going to discredit that. But it's just a matter of time, and does that distraction, cost them a game or two, right? That's my ultimate opinion there.
So, yeah, it's a touchy subject there. So LSU, I think it'll all depend on. I don't have their schedule in front of me, but I think they'll be a crash and burn team. But if they catch fire, they can beat anybody, kind of deal. So if you get those cats over there buying in, and Coach O gets them rolling, I mean if they believe they can win and they're hyped up for that game, they can beat anybody in the country. They have the talent to. I don't trust the coaching, and I don't trust the locker room, like the atmosphere. What's the word I'm looking for there? The mentality of the team. I think they are one of those teams that, if they get beat down on themselves and they're likely to crash and burn, start fighting with each other theoretically, and crash and burn. They could go from, you kind of like last year with Miss State. They lose that game out the gates, and then they just crashed and burned. Eventually, they got hit rock bottom and started playing better. But they're also a team that if they were to win 3 or 4 out the gates, you better watch out whoever that 5th team is, because they got a head of steam, and if they get rolling, look out.
So I mean, I can't disagree with you there. So overall, I think obviously, I think Haynes King will have enough time to kind of get into the system, or whoever's your starting quarterback at the time. I think you could pull out I'm gonna have to look here. I think you look at maybe at worst 10-2. I think you could possibly go 11-1, depending on how the turnout of the Ole Miss game. And I think LSU is your biggest threat too, outside of Ole Miss and Alabama. So I think you go 10-2 is the worst case for me. Best case being 11-1. But honestly, I think it makes the Alabama game that much more important. I genuinely think that, I'd like to see Bama lose one just to see if A&M can squeak in. And, I think you'd have to beat Bama, though. But if, it'd be interesting to see A&M in an SEC championship game, right? I think I think in a situation where we feel like there's really no big true threat in the East. You can't discount the threat of Florida ever. But
you're getting close to that point where you can, though. As long as Mullen keeps the train trending in this direction, I'm not worried about them long term.
I get your point. I just think that we saw, for me, I don't like watching or don't overestimating anybody, because I always look back to 2019 South Carolina, and that just stings to the point where I can't overlook anybody.
That game cost me $100. Thanks. So the thing there is right now you got to look at it this way. So if Georgia slips up, you have Auburn as your potential other loss, which is not they look like they got a pretty decent rebuild right now. Florida will consistently have LSU and nipping at their butt. So if you lose to Florida, they'll probably drop one there. And then, depending on what happens there, I don't see – I like the trajectory of Georgia a whole lot more than I do right now. Like Mullen, everything about him screams, I'm in over my head. I don't care about anything, and I'm just looking for the next big gig. I could be wrong, but that's just the vibe I get from him.
Yeah, I think it's kind of obvious that he doesn't really enjoy recruiting. There were obviously that talk of him going to the Jets. There was him linked to the Jets earlier. Obviously, and the weird thing was he kept Grantham there. But let go of the safeties and secondary coach.
The safeties they were bad all around on defense.
Oh, no, that defense was bad.
Their front 7 was why they lost to A&M. The secondary was fine.
Ran down their throats. That's just the way that was.
I think there was a time A&M gets the ball somewhere in the third quarter. I think it was like 3 minutes left, and they go on a 10-plus, I want to say close to 15-play drive with nothing but runs, just right down their throats, milking the clock, and shorten that game to where even when Florida was scoring at will, they weren't stopping A&M. And people like to forget that Spiller fumbles or Anai Smith fumbles to give Florida that game. So I've seen a lot of Gators say that if oh, if we don't fumble, we go down and kick the game-winning field goal. Well, you don't get the lead if Anais Smith doesn't fumble. So if you want to play that game, it goes both ways. And I don't think Anais Smith fumbled to this day. The other one was quite obviously a fumble. So Anais Smith fumbled because he thought the play was over too early. Your guy fumbled because we knocked the ever-living crap out of him. So
yeah, no, I was watching that game live, and that it was one of the things that I was kind of watching, because obviously I'm a Gator hater, man. I want to see the Florida Gators lose,
right?
And watching that game live, I'm sitting here watching it, and then your guy fumbles, and I was like, oh, son of a bitch, because I know their offense could move, right? And I knew your defense was good, but their offense was really, really good. Mm-hmm. So I was worried that they were going to score and make it out of reach. And then next thing you know, boom, fumbles it, and I was like, their defense is not going to hold up. And lo and behold, Kellen Mond and Spiller,
the only question was did we score too fast? And I was very worried about us driving. I was worried about driving down the throats, scoring with a minute left, and then I'll tell you what though, Kyle Trask, he lost a lot of credit because of the bowl game, and everybody was like, well, is what he has around him. I was not. I was a Kyle Trask hater, and I came out of that game very impressed with the kind of throws he was making. And then I know you don't want to hear this, but Kyle Pitts is one of the most amazing football players I've ever watched. It is ridiculous.
Just because I'm a Gator hater doesn't mean I can't respect it. And it was weird that, like, looking into it, I was watching that game, and Pitts had a great game, and honestly, for y'all, Weidermeyer had a good game too. Mm-hmm. But looking at Pitts, it was just something different about him. I don't know what it was going on, but he was just one of those talents. I guess it's a hybrid possibility there.
Yeah, we'll see what happens in the NFL if they try to make him block at all. If they just strictly throw him out wide and let him run.
Receiver, that's a huge mismatch because he's got the speed.
Right.
He's got that kind of speed out there, but it's the NFL, so you really have to be careful because the NFL will chew you up and spit you out. So but you can't teach size, right? So size can help him out as well.
Yeah. So hey, real quick, you mentioned Jalen Weidemeyer having a big game. And just a little shot at you and your boys real quick. Jalen Weidemeyer has been doing that. The only people that have been able to slow him down are the Georgia Bulldogs because they absolutely mugged him at the end of that game in 2019. I was at that game in the rain, so I'm a little upset because I thought we were going down to win it. And that fourth down play, he was definitely defensive holding or PI. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring that up.
No, that was a tough damn game. I think that's just a testament to our defense where it was at the time. Obviously, I'm just relaying to what we're talking about here.
Right.
At the time, we played a very physical brand of football, and this. Y'all do the same thing.
Right.
So, I think that was a testament to our defense being as physical as it was. 2019 was kind of a down year offensively for us. I know you don't keep up with it, but the year before. And we were literally more one-dimensional than I could ever really imagine in previous decade, guarantee it. We just didn't have a lot of talent. Obviously Jake Fromm was Jake Fromm, but when you don't have the receiving depth that we, didn't have it at the time, it made it difficult. But luckily for us, you take the running backs and we were able to, hold defensively hold you and score just enough to win the game and come out of there with a win. So, and Georgia fans know this as well. Kyle Field is one of those games or one of those environments where it's so, I don't even know how to explain it. It's just so not hostile, but so intimidating if you ain't careful.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like Georgia, a program like Georgia, right, and Alabama can go anywhere and really have a play in time. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, you look at that right there, but for the most part, anybody else comes in here, it's intimidating. It really is.
Have you ever been to a game there? At Kyle Field?
Where at?
At Kyle Field.
No.
Okay. I'll tell you something. Kyle Field is crazy on TV, especially when it's a top 5 matchup and stuff like that. Or as soon as it goes to at night, everybody's like that though. But what it doesn't do justice of is just it's one of those stadiums that doesn't get enough justice for when you're in person. You just can't explain it. And it's the crowd on top of you. So like when you're watching the game, there's so much stuff that's going on from kickoff or an hour before until the clock hits 0. when the TV goes to commercial, they're still screaming the entire time. There's no break for the team. They're yelling the entire time, doing all kinds of stuff. It's kind of like the opposite of Auburn. Auburn's a great time, and I love that stadium, but the atmosphere is all induced electronically. They have good fans and they're loud and it's a fun stadium, but they bring in a lot of fake noise and stuff like that, and it kind of kills the vibes. But or I'm sorry, another one like that is Ole Miss. Ole Miss is very kind of dead stadium, really, in my opinion. But Kyle Field is one of those where it doesn't seem as savage as it is in person. So if you ever, I don't know, they're about to redo the future schedules, but I would highly suggest going to Kyle Field. Auburn itself is a great town. Don't get me wrong. Auburn's my favorite SEC town, and then Athens, and then Kyle Field and College Station in that order. But those were the three so far in my travels that if you had to go to one of those three towns and stadiums, go to those three. Baton Rouge is the greatest stadium experience I've ever experienced, but it is not safe. It's not safe at all. And if you're with a big group of friends, it can be fun. But Baton Rouge, the town, is awful. But the stadium, Tiger Stadium, is probably the best atmosphere in college football.
Yeah, I'm just knowing, dealing with people that from Louisiana. I worked with people back when I was in the military, things like that.
Right.
They'll tell you Baton Rouge is not a fun place. But, I mean, when it comes to Saturdays in the Bayou, everybody kind of stops what they're doing and focuses on the Tigers. So, I mean, you get that collective energy, and that obviously it creates what I would consider a truly intimidating, hostile environment. And that's what that's what college football fans want to see.
Right.
But I'm going to have to wrap this up, buddy. I just want to say thank you again for coming on the show.
No problem. I'm happy to be here. I love talking ball, and you just got to tell me to shut up sometimes. I'm not going to lie. You get me talking ball, I won't shut up. So,
but I mean,
I wanted to tell you real quick. I'm sorry. Last one, I promise. You were talking about Jake Fromm, and he didn't have receivers. I came away very impressed with the receivers in general last year, relatively compared. I thought they were way overrated, and then I watched them, and I was wrong. Do you know that anytime that Jake Fromm threw for more than 25 yards, Georgia's winning percentage in his career was, I think, in the 400s, and it was in the 900s anytime he stayed under 25 attempts. Yeah. So if that kind of tells you the kind of quarterback Jake Fromm was and kind of stats that we do over at Dash Sports, we get all kinds of deep stats like that, and we go back and watch film and look at all that. If you ever want to look during football season, come check us out. But what is the deal with Pickens? Is he done at Georgia, or do you think he's just going to come back? Or
my opinion, he comes back.
Yeah.
Do
y'all have anybody to replace him? As in, like, yeah.
I think it seems like his injury is recovering well. Looking at the schedule, I think you could see him come back in maybe the last couple games of the season. Obviously, depending on how our season's going at the time, which if it goes as expected right now, see him ease his way in and get some snaps in a couple games leading up to the championship game for in Atlanta. And then obviously you have him ready to go for the playoffs if we make it there. Obviously, the SEC championship game. Fortunately for us, this is the opposite of our 2019 situation where we have right now, Pickens being that guy. But we have so much depth there that we didn't have in 2019 after we lost those playmakers. For our spring game, we didn't have Pickens, Blaylock, Marcus Rosemary, nothing like that. And after that, we had a bunch of guys still stepping up and making plays, which was something that's really, beneficial for me to see because I was worried about that, just seeing what it was like at the G-Day. But I think he'll come back and play. Just depends on how the season goes up until he's ready to come back. Go from there.
So, all right, man. Well, I won't keep you too much longer. I wish that we could all just, drop our jobs and do this for a living, but not all of us are like J-Boy where we can just become. Not all of us are like J-Boy where we can just become Paul Feinbaum overnight. So.
Yeah, that's an interesting story for another day, right?
Yeah, exactly. So he'll talk your ear off more than I will. So. I appreciate you having me on. I'm gonna give me follow us at Dashsports, DASH_sports with a Z. We could follow SEC and Big 12 sports, and specifically the Texas teams. But during football season, it's a free for all, and we'll cover whatever. Appreciate you having me on.
Hey man, thanks for coming on.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Now I got to figure out how to get out of here. All right, thank you.
Yes, sir. All right, guys. That is all for today. Stay tuned. Hope you enjoyed the show. And on that note, go Dogs.